Hello, this is Father Stodola from Our Lady of the Rosary Church in Laredo, Texas, and I would like to tell you today 5 things about Christopher Columbus which perhaps you did not know. I was brought up in a Catholic family which we always believed in respect for everybody and certainly social justice, but I would hope that with these points that I'm going to cover we can focus our attention more on logical solutions rather than on emotional responses. First point, Christopher Columbus was an explorer and a discoverer more than a colonizer. He was not involved in the administration of the places he discovered. Therefore, there was little, if any, opportunity to mistreat or enslave native peoples. According to Cristóbal Colón de Carvajal, his 20th century descendant who lives in Madrid, the ethical nature of his forefather would not have permitted that he be the force behind any genocide, and there is no historical proof on which such a claim can be grounded. And that is a quote. That was an interview that he made for the ABC newspaper. In addition, Columbus made 4 voyages to the New World in a period of only 11 years, at a time when sea travel was lengthy and laborious. That left him little time for governing. Further research has led me to evidence that his titles of governor and viceroy and so forth were clauses that existed in his contract with the Catholic monarchs, that is Ferdinand and Isabella, before he ever set sail. In other words, they were honorary titles conferred in advance of his discovery of the New World. With the little bit of governing that he did do, he didn't prove to be adept at it, not only because of harsh punishments meted out by his subordinates, but also because of disagreements with his fellow Europeans, and so the Queen withdrew his administrative privileges. Point number 2. Columbus's observations of the native peoples whom he first met were that they were simple, friendly, and hospitable people. Evidently, groups of local men even helped him and his crew to disassemble one of his ships, the Santa Maria, so as to build their fort. Bartering also went on, particularly when native women were seen wearing gold rings. Before leaving the islands, Columbus left behind somewhere between 20 and 40 men as colonizers. They had established a fort called Navidad, using the remains of the Santa Maria. When Columbus returned to the fort, he discovered that all of those men left behind had been killed and their eyes gouged out. Now, in defense of the natives, and this comes to us through Columbus's son, it is probable that some of the colonizers did something to arouse the wrath of the natives, but retaliation was not something that Columbus ever sought. Point number 3. Another factor that influenced Columbus's policy toward the indigenous peoples was when they arrived at a certain island and discovered human remains in cooking pots and seasoned human legs strung up on a cord similar to the way we would cure hams. Evidently, some tribes took it upon themselves to subject other tribes to cannibalistic practices. Columbus's sense of morality and human decency led him to want to Christianize these Indians, so as to free their victims from unjust bondage and to teach their oppressors the value of human life. Point number 4. Before departing for the New World, Columbus was under strict instructions from Queen Isabella to, and this is a quote, treat said Indians very well and with affection, and to refrain from doing them any harm, as both people should come to an agreement and serve each other the best they can. There is scant evidence that Columbus mistreated or enslaved anybody, as he was an explorer and a discoverer. He was often involved in negotiations with chieftains and tribal leaders. There is, however, evidence that men under his command did take to using punishments which were commonplace in Europe at the time for actions they considered criminal, such as stealing. On this last point, I would submit that in an effort to establish a society based on law, one commonly acts on precedent. We can hardly fault Columbus for imposing punishments which were commonplace at the time. I will also point out that currently most of the countries today in Eastern and Western Europe have banned corporal punishment against children in schools and in many cases at home. But most have only done so in the past 20 years. In the United States, corporal punishment is still permitted at home, and in many states it is permitted in school. So do we fault a parent or a teacher for doing what he or she is legally entitled to do? The fifth point. I have been a Knight of Columbus for nearly 40 years. My father was a Knight of Columbus, my uncle was a Knight of Columbus, my grandmother was a daughter of the Court of Isabella. And in the most recent issue, the July-August issue of Columbia magazine, that is the Knight's bi-monthly publication, there is an article entitled "The Knights of Columbus and Social Equality." In it, we see that Father Michael McGivney established the Knights of Columbus in 1882, and he did so on the principle that all members would have equal standing irrespective of race or national origin. The article provides a photograph of a group of knights, both black and white, at Camp Zachary Taylor in Kentucky in 1918. On visiting the founder's grave in 1900, Father James O'Donnell stated, "Before the altar all are equal. The beggar, if such there be, kneels beside the possessor of wealth, and the man of dark skin occupies the same pew with his white brother. And this spirit pervades the Knights of Columbus, and so should it ever be." The Knights of Columbus provided educational schools for black veterans returning home from World War I. They fought vehemently against the Ku Klux Klan. They funded the Cardinal Gibbons Institute in Maryland to help educate African Americans. Supreme Knight Francis Matthews stepped down from his post with the Knights of Columbus to serve on President Truman's Committee on Civil Rights and was instrumental in helping to integrate the federal workforce. The current Supreme Knight, Carl Anderson, served for nearly a decade on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and more recently has brought black clergymen together with government officials to discuss, among other things, effective models of policing. At the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., there is an enormous bronze sculpture that is in the chapel of our Mother of Africa, which depicts the African-American experience from slavery to emancipation. The Knights of Columbus contributed $100,000 toward the construction of the chapel, which was dedicated in 1997. And all of this has been done in the name of Christopher Columbus, whom for us represents truth, justice, and the American way. Thank you, and I welcome your comments.